This is what it's like inside Britannic. That's a spiral staircase that allowed the firemen to get to their workstations. You can still see the tile floor. You can see the silt. Now realize that the ship is laying on its side, so I've turned this photograph into the proper perspective for you. All right, these are video grabs from, still grabs from the video, and then they're augmented with some other photographs from Lee Bishop, and you can see the rusticles here. This is the environment that we need to move through with that little camera. You can see the doorway right beyond the staircase that we need to swim through to access another compartment. The concept of going down that spiral staircase scares even me, because it's just so easy to get totally screwed up, no pun intended, trying to go down a spiral staircase. But one of the other areas that we went is up in the bow under the capstan. And the thing that's amazing is that this is such a stagnant area that you could actually see the wood decking after almost 100 years is still in place inside the ship. You can only wonder what else is just beyond that. And again, I'm operating at a depth of about 360 feet here. And again, as we start to make our way out, we can see more coral growth and mussels that are starting to grow on some of the staircases. But even still, after 100 years of immersion, this wreck is still in pristine condition. And one of the things that we discovered, which was pretty neat, is that they had water fountains back in 1911 for the crew, so that while they're working on shoveling all that coal, they could stop and get a drink of water. So another neat feature that we found out. One of the things that National Geographic wanted us to go do, as you could see in this grainy image from 2006, this is the only surviving Marconi wireless tuner in the world. Well, why is that important? Well, this is exactly the same as the one that was on Titanic. And if you recall, that was the first time ever that wireless telegraphy, Morse code, was used to call QDQ, which was the predecessor to SOS. It was the call for help. These tuners, this is the only one existing in the world. And here's a graphic of what it would look like. National Geographic had struck a deal with the Greek government to allow us to recover that wireless tuner so it could be restored and be the only one in the world like it, and it's still existing. Well, to make these incredibly challenging dives obviously costs you. It costs you big. To do 40 to 50 minutes is going to make you have 5 hours, a minimum of 5 to 7 hours of decompression. And decompression is spent just like this, hanging, as we say, dopes on a rope. Some of us are listening to headphones, some of us are playing Sudoku. Most of us just kind of meditate and try to find Zen. During that time, support divers come down, they take away your stage bottles, they take away your cameras, and they'll bring you some juice boxes or water, some grapes, anything to try and make 4 or 5 hours go fast. It doesn't work. Most people think that it would be very relaxing, that you'd get out of the water and you're going to be all cool. You're not. You are totally exhausted. There is nothing like making a dive of that magnitude and then hanging underneath a tuna ball on a PVC deco stage for 5 hours, just going like this. You can barely stand. All you really want to do is get out of your suit, get some hot soup in you, and then call it a day. So this is the view looking back up. As you can see, the visibility out there is absolutely fantastic. Fortunately for us, there's usually no current in the Kia Channel. There's also no marine life. Unfortunately, the areas that I've seen in the Aegean have been totally fished out. And even in some of the images, aside from very small fish, there's just not a lot of life there. And it's amazing that you've got such clear water, such beautiful coral growing and protecting the shipwreck, and yet there's no marine life, which says something about the economics in Greece. There is dives are going on every time that we're decompressing. There are still dives going on, and we're using basically robots. In this case, you're seeing that we had 2 ROVs, or remotely operated vehicles, that were working the same way we were. There was a fiber optic cable going down, and then there was a main cable. And the reason is that you'll see that this one has a single camera with battery systems to power the lights, 150-watt lights, and then there's an operator system where basically an operator is flying this submarine and driving it. So side by side in the control room are two people looking at roughly the same image. One is white, black and white, very grainy. That's what the pilot's using. And then right next to him with the high-definition camera is a camera operator. So even though we may get 50 to 80 minutes of underwater high def with the big systems, we may be sending these to go and film the propeller at the whole other end of the wreck. They can operate all night. The problem is that they really can't go inside the wreck because their cables are buoyant. And you think about that, if they're buoyant, that means they float off the bottom so they don't snag on anything. But if you go inside the shipwreck, that also means they're buoyant and they're going to float up to the top of the compartment, creating a snagging hazard. So they're very limited in what they can do, but they can help you get the shot and also reconnoiter areas that you may want to go to the next day. There's Evan Kovacs again with another one of the systems. Now this was a first in that this is to our knowledge, it was definitely the first for Woods Hole, the first 3D robot ROV that was shooting high-def stereo in 3D. And someone earlier today said to me that he really kind of looked like Wall-E. So when I go back, I'm going to say, yeah, it kind of does look like Wall-E from the video, but you can really get a good idea of what it looks like there with the stereo camera and realize that there's a lot going on here, and these tools allow us to extend not only our dive options, but come back with more footage for the client. A little later tonight, I'm going to be talking about editing. Everything I've been talking about right now is about being the cameraman. It's about getting the shot. And although it's challenging and technical, the real hard part is taking hundreds of hours of raw footage and putting into something that you want to see. As some of you know, and those would be the non-divers here, nothing's more boring than watching something that somebody else thinks is really interesting, but it just goes on and on and on, probably like this presentation. So what you want to do is you want to make it interesting, and that's where being a producer or an editor is really going to come into play. And in order to have a lot of material, it's like cooking. You need a lot of good ingredients, and you need a lot of different shots. And a little later on tonight, I'm going to cover some of those angles and stuff like this, camera angles. But this is basically the overview of how we make an underwater documentary film from the nuts and bolts aspects. First, we're divers. We've got to make a dive to 400 feet. We've got to successfully support those dive teams. That involves support divers. There's a hyperbaric chamber on the boat. We have dive doctors on board. Everything is done to make the dives as safe as possible. But unfortunately, sometimes, no matter how safe you try to be, bad things happen. On this particular expedition in 2009, we had suffered a fatality. It was the first ever on board one of my photo expeditions, and it was the first ever on Britannic. Unfortunately, it was our mission leader, our expedition leader. It was Carl Spencer. Carl Spencer, on this particular dive, had gone down. You could see we were covering the ROV, and as he was ascending, basically went into convulsions, drowned at 200 feet. We had to send him up because although he had 5 hours of decompression, he was underwater and not breathing, and the only option was to send him up. He did not survive. And I want to bring this to your attention because that actually ended our expedition. Although we achieved all of our goals, although we got all of the footage that the client wanted, and although his wife Victoria wanted us to continue the operation, the Discovery Channel said, you know what, we're just going to take all this material and just put it in the vault for now. We're not going to produce the documentary. One of the things that we had done is, I'm a member of the Explorers Club, and we had brought down onto the wreck a flag. This flag has been onto the tops of mountains. It has been to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. It has been on Titanic. It has been on Britannic. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been on a shuttle mission in outer space. With Carl's passing, the Explorers Club, which is based out of New York City, asked me to bring it down to the wreck, take this picture, and in honor of him, it's retired. It'll be hung on the walls of the Explorers Club with his picture, in the true spirit of exploration and adventure. Unfortunately, when you tread where people have never gone before, sometimes, as I said, it exacts a terrible cost. And this was my friend and our expedition leader, Carl Spencer.